How many times can a country lose its entire leadership before that stops being an event and starts being a permanent condition? Because in the space of 9 months, Iran's government was wiped out, rebuilt, and wiped out again. Twice. Before we go further, if stories like this keep you thinking after the video ends, tap that like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells this channel that careful, deep storytelling is worth making more of. Subscribe too, because this only gets stranger from here. Let's start with the number that made headlines everywhere. 40. That's how many senior Iranian commanders Israel says it killed in under 60 seconds. Not 40 over a week, not over a month. 40 in the time it takes to boil an egg. On the opening night of a war that began February 28, 2026, Israeli jets struck a compound in Tehran, where Iran's supreme leader was meeting with his most senior circle. Around 30 bombs hit that location. When the smoke cleared, roughly 40 of the most powerful men in Iran's government were gone, including the IRGC commander, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, a senior security advisor, and the defense minister. In a separate strike that same night, the supreme leader himself was killed. Think about what it takes to pull that off. You don't accidentally kill this many senior officials in under a minute. You need to know, in advance, exactly where the most protected men in the country will be standing, and enough coordinated firepower to hit all of them before a single one can run. It wasn't just the top layer either. Reports named an entire second tier killed in the same wave. The head of intelligence at Iran's wartime command, the officer managing the supreme leader's own communications, both the current and former heads of Iran's most sensitive nuclear research body, the commander of Iran's missile and drone forces, and senior figures from police and domestic intelligence. Look at that list closely. It isn't random. It reads like a checklist. Political leadership, military command, the missile program, nuclear research, domestic intelligence, 5 or 6 separate arms of the state, deliberately kept apart from each other for exactly this reason, all sitting in the same room on the same night. That separation is the whole design. Authoritarian states build overlapping rival institutions specifically so no single branch can turn against the regime and take the whole country down alone. It's a wall built to stop danger from coming from inside the house, but it was never built to stop a threat watching from outside the house for months, maybe years, before ever striking. There's one more name from that first night that doesn't fit the pattern of generals and spy chiefs. Iran's former president, a man who hadn't held official power in over a decade, reportedly killed in a strike on his own home. That tells you the target list wasn't limited to people currently running the war machine. It reached into the country's broader political establishment. Nobody with a history inside the system was treated as off-limits. Here's the part most coverage missed entirely. February 28th wasn't the first time, it was the second. Go back to June 2025, an earlier round of fighting, sometimes called the 12-Day War. Israeli strikes on Tehran killed the man who was then the IRGC's commander-in-chief, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, the head of the Wartime Command Headquarters, and the commander of Iran's missile force, along with a nuclear physicist. Now line the two rosters up side by side. IRGC Commander-in-Chief, killed in 2025, replaced. Then that replacement's own circle wiped out in 2026. Armed Forces Chief of Staff, same story, different man, same seat. Even the nuclear thread repeats. A physicist killed in the first wave, senior nuclear research figures killed in the second. This isn't two unrelated attacks that happen to overlap. It's proof that the war can reach into a specific chair of power no matter who's sitting in it. The seat is the target, not the person. Every position had to be rebuilt from scratch in the months between. New commanders, barely settled into their jobs, stepping into roles that had just been violently emptied. Militaries normally plan succession over years. Compressing that twice, under wartime pressure in under a year, is about as close to organizational collapse as you can get without ceasing to exist on paper. And the story didn't end in February. In the chaos after the supreme leader's death, real day-to-day authority sat with Ali Larihani, a former Speaker of Parliament, repeat presidential candidate, and genuine regime insider, widely described as the country's de facto leader, while a formal successor was arranged. On March 17, 2026, Ali Larijani was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Tehran, targeted at his daughter's home. Reports suggest significant intelligence resources had been dedicated specifically to tracking his movements beforehand. This was a deliberate, sustained hunt for the single most influential man left standing in Iran's government. The head of Iran's Basij paramilitary force, his deputy, and members of Larihani's own security detail were killed the same night. 19 days. That's how long the most senior replacement in the entire government survived. 3 days later, more names. The IRGC's spokesperson, the public face of the regime's wartime messaging, a senior Basij intelligence figure, and a senior commander from the Ministry of Intelligence. 3 different institutional functions collapsed within days of each other. Put it together. In less than a week, Iran lost its de facto leader, the head of its largest paramilitary force and his deputy, the public voice of its military, and senior figures across 2 intelligence services. 5 pillars of power, gone in 7 days, stacked on top of everything lost weeks earlier. So here's the honest way to add this up. This was never one decapitation strike. It was at least 3 distinct waves across roughly 9 months: June 2025, February 2026, March 2026, each hitting a different generation of leadership occupying largely the same roles. Every time Iran filled an emptied seat, that replacement became a target too. In Larijani's case, the most senior replacement in the entire government was found and killed within 19 days of stepping into the job. That's not a single dramatic night. That's a standing policy. Rebuild, and we will find the new leadership too. And it changes what every future appointment inside that government actually means, because whoever steps into one of those seats now inherits a job that has proven fatal to nearly everyone who held it before them. 40 in a minute was never the whole story. It was only the loudest opening line of one. If this is the first time you're truly understanding what happened inside that war, like this video, subscribe for the next one, and send it to someone who still thinks it started and ended in a single headline.